Trump is a 60s liberal's dream come true. Accusations from racism to treason.
But the 60s liberals were passionately against racism. This meant equal rights and no discrimination. When President Trump is accused of racism, this does not refer to actions against equal rights, not to actions at all, but mere comments that the media claims to be racist, comments that are mere mention of facts. For example, that a portion of illegal immigrants are criminals or come to collect welfare. Then the media claims facts are racist.
Whenever Trump calls people stupid for being leftists, the media claim he is calling them stupid because they are black, Hispanic, etc. As a matter of fact, he calls white men from the right wing stupid too, but here the media does not accuse him of being racist against whites. Uncouth, a loudmouth? Yes. Racist intentions to harm minorities? No. If a citizen simply read Trump's statements on his own without the journalist's commentary, would he have reached on his own the conclusion that Trump is racist or that he is simply a loudmouth? Who, however, is the only hope to stop the war, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and rapid illegal immigration. The fact that citizens are so easily tricked is due to their being made emotional in character by school and media. Thus, if a citizen thought or even wrote down the basics, Trump would appear as a more attractive candidate than he would when the citizen is bombarded by emotional comments without hard facts. Stating that most blacks are killed by black criminals and not by the police may sound insensitive, but it is a truth which is necessary to be known in the face of leftist propaganda that presents a false dogma that leads to racial division and a disunited nation. The truth is not racist. Trump is guilty of being careless in his expression and not explaining that by criminals he meant criminals and not all immigrants, or that by ban he meant a possible temporary measure meant to allow the state to check the immigrant's background. He explained this later, and obviously if he thought this would be misunderstood, and even more so if he actually was a racist, he would have hidden this, been more careful in order not to lose votes. Being careless simply shows he believed he had nothing to hide. But the media made sure to always misinterpret everything. Misspeaking to the point of buffoonery is the typical accusation, but this is not something a person of the 60s can be stressed about. It is not as if the 60s generation were overly careful with their words, overly sensitive or proper in their behavior, as in puritanical with the other sex. And even Trump, even in his personal life, is less uncouth than 60s President Johnson was in his everyday dealings with his staff, friends, and opponents. How can any objective person believe Trump is racist against blacks, Hispanics, gays, and women, especially since, for example, nearly 30% of Hispanics voted for him? There have been no actions or comments, for example, against blacks or gays, but the idea is, if Trump is in favor of free speech and does not want to limit speech that the left claims to be offensive, he is racist against every minority. If Trump does not accept the notion that blacks are oppressed by whites because a white police officer killed a black criminal, and because black criminals are sent to prison so they cannot hurt innocent people, knowing they would victimize mostly other blacks, then he is racist against blacks. If he does not try to force all states to force all schools to provide transgender bathrooms, to allow boys to use the girls' bathrooms, he is racist against gays. If he does not accept the disappearance of the border, he hates Hispanics. But the foundation of all this is that if the media and other politicians, the establishment, say he is racist, then he is racist against every group in society. Trump is accused of racism because he appointed Republicans to certain positions instead of Democrats. The left claims that Republicans are racist, thus this is a racist action. It is not that they will do anything racist, it is that they will not force schools to allow boys to use girls' toilets, and will allow schools to freely decide what to do. To prove he is not racist, Trump should have appointed Democrats, socialists, or communists. Some accusations are too stupid to have to argue against, too stupid for any rational person to believe, no matter how high one is. 60s protests were not about insensitive, offensive comments or unpleasant facts.
Trump brought the unemployment rate among blacks and Hispanics lower than at any time in the recent past, but opposes illegal immigration, something that all governments have opposed for centuries, even when restrictions were few. Deportations continued, even under President Obama. If Trump's policies are racist or quite the opposite is a matter of ideology. If saying no to this new leftist demand for open borders is proof of being a fascist, then all governments were fascist up to now. Hippies were fascists because they did not demand open borders.
Under President Trump, black unemployment fell to its lowest level in almost 50 years. Trump was the one who made the wide-range prison reform possible for those who are not career criminals, something that benefits mostly blacks committing minor offenses, a request by black activists that goes back decades and was not implemented even under President Obama. But the media, black political activists, and the rest of the left do not care about blacks living better, but about breaking society into rival factions. Creating rivalry and protests is not a means to an end, it is the end itself. It is the goal. It is due to the nature of non-satisfaction that leftists suffer from. Nothing satisfies because the intention is to always feel oppressed so as to always protest and demand something. Again, the issue for the protest is not the issue. The issue is the protest itself and promoting the left. With the numbers for unemployment, household income, and the stock market under Trump being the best or close to the best ever in American history, Trump would normally face little opposition, but instead widespread support at other times, before the media became a means for full-force leftist propaganda. According to a Harvard study, clearly over 90% of the media coverage of Trump was negative, but the media massively supported Trump when he ordered the limited bombing of Syria because of the chemical attack supposedly carried out by the Assad government, which proves the media is not against Trump because of his character or the Russian affair, but because of his policies, because the media want more war and more mass immigration. Trump had a powerful incentive to go to war against Syria, as this would give him support from the media, which supported him only on the 2 occasions on which he ordered a small-scale bombing in that country. Yet he refused to choose war, keeping his promise to first destroy ISIS and then get out. Trump is among the few politicians and the only recent president who actually kept his promises, and where he found difficulty in keeping them, as with the wall, it was because of opposition from politicians. But could there not have been another candidate who was also against war and supported free speech, even the use of marijuana, by people in the privacy of their homes, but who would be more polite? There was, but the people, including the 60s people, failed to vote for him in the primaries. The argument, but I can't vote for a Republican, even if he was different from other Republicans, is not acceptable from someone who claims to be an open-minded person from the 60s. Many hate Trump because they actually believe he is like Hitler. Seeing it this way, it makes sense to protest violently against him, but no logical person can believe this. Hitler was bad not because he did not accept tens of millions of immigrants, but because he killed millions in invasions and forbade free speech, and intimidated anyone who disagreed with him, or did worse. This is more similar to the left on all levels, from politician to troublemaker and street thug. Clearly, it is the media with Goebbels-like propaganda brainwashing people that makes people believe Trump is Hitler. But is this the 60s ideal? That in the future, people will believe anything that the media tells them? Don't trust anyone over 30. Today, the brainwashed youth fanatically believe as a religion the policy implemented by the ultra-rich elites and their employees in the media and the tools of a fringe ideology and the warmongers. Leftists believing that Trump not wanting illegal immigrants is racist, fascist, and makes him a Nazi means they do not know or understand the basics. All governments for centuries have not accepted illegal immigrants. Trump's policies, deportations, separating families, and using cages, are the same as Obama's, only a little stricter. By not accepting illegal immigrants, one is in agreement on the issue with Hitler, but he is also in agreement with Roosevelt, Kennedy, Churchill, de Gaulle, etc. Thus, if one ridiculously believes that agreeing on one issue with someone makes you like that person, then Trump is as much like Hitler as he is like Kennedy, because Kennedy was like Hitler too, and so was Obama. Hitler is not hated for having rejected immigrants, but for his war with millions of dead and his wish to forbid free speech. Thus, he is more like Hillary Clinton than like Trump. Inability to understand these simple things means one has no knowledge because of school and no ability to understand because of the media. Schools teach not facts but emotionalism, social justice, and minority rights through the leftist point of view. Media shows half knowledge. The viewer learns that an entire family is not accepted at the border, so it is separated, but does not learn that the same was happening under Obama, and does not think that it is the family's choice not to leave the United States and thus stay together. Years earlier, courts had decided that so-called unaccompanied children cannot be sent back at the border, but must be accepted and examined if they must receive asylum. Thus, under the Obama administration, families used to separate intentionally before the border and send their children to the United States alone, as the parents would have been rejected. Under Trump, families, children, and parents started coming together so that the American authorities would be forced to do the separating. The same thing as before, but now the separation appeared to be an embarrassment to Trump. If the court decisions change, then the children can be sent away too, and the United States would not have to accept all children from any country that claimed to be afraid in their country so as to force, with these words, the American authorities to admit them. Moreover, the number of deportations under Presidents Obama and Trump was similar. Obama can be said to have deported more or fewer illegal immigrants than previous presidents, depending on the statistics and which type of deportations they include. School and media do not provide education and information, but the opposite. The left primarily uses school and media to turn the population into emotional people who believe in lies, instead of logical people who believe the truth. No dictionary or encyclopedia definition of fascism states that fascism is not accepting illegal immigrants or refusing to increase enormously the number of immigrants. No dictionary definition states that fascism or racism is putting criminals in prison if those criminals happen to be black. If Trump was not against war and mass immigration, would the establishment try to impeach him? They want to cancel democracy over their desire for war and mass immigration. If someone had said at Woodstock, in the future, if Russia is no longer communist but does not accept what will be called multiculturalism and tries to exercise political control over the areas close to her, like we do, then should we consider Russia to be our enemy? Should we consider that any American who does not hate the Russians but speaks to Russian officials is a traitor? Would the hippies have said yes? Obviously, they would have said no, as the anti-Russia obsession is simply a form of racism and justifies imperialism. The secret services and media claim Russia is the enemy, but the Constitution does not state that these institutions that did not exist at the time determine who the enemy is. The CIA does not determine who America's enemies are. At different times, presidents supported Saddam Hussein or attacked him. The president did not ask for permission from the CIA or the media to pursue his policy. Some citizens claim Russia is the enemy and thus meeting Russian officials is suspicious. Other citizens believe Israel is the enemy and thus meeting Israeli officials is suspicious. But neither of the two has the right to decide the matter, especially when we know the dark motives behind their views. What excuse can there be for talking to the Russians secretly behind the back of the CIA? Perhaps that one believes that the CIA does not want peace but war. Wouldn't this argument convince a 60s liberal? Or would he believe it was treason? And even this, with the appearance of new evidence, was later proven to be mostly false. United States officials were informed about these talks before and after they occurred, making treason a complete impossibility. Only formalities were not adhered to, and the man chiefly accused did not inform the officials about one foreign policy issue being discussed. The convictions concerned tax evasion and lying to the prosecutor. No conspiracy with Russia. But let us assume for the sake of argument that Trump's campaign had cooperated with the Russians. The effect of this cooperation would have been ridiculously small compared to the enormous role played in the elections by the media that propagandized against Trump nonstop. Would the hippies have been more outraged at Trump or at the media? These are the things that leftists either believe in or at least accept. Is it possible that these leftists are patriots, angry that Trump is cooperating in some way with Russia, that they are patriots who wish to protect America's strategic geopolitical interests on the other side of the planet, and that is why they see Russia as the enemy? And that this is not only another excuse to condemn Trump? Patriots? When they condemn white supremacy, they do not mean the few racists, they mean the entire white race, and believe the entire society is racist in structure. They do not have a good idea of their country. Believing this means you think your country is evil. It is true that police shoot blacks over twice as much as their percentage in society would normally justify, but this is because there's much more serious crime from the black community that commits half the murders in the country, despite being a minority. Just as men are only 50% of the population, but are nearly 100% of the people that are shot at by police. 95% of blacks are killed by other blacks. Police kill under 1%. For example, in New York, blacks commit the majority of gun crime and shootings against police officers, but police shoot at blacks much less percentage-wise. Instead, whites commit 5% of gun crime and 0% of shooting at police, but police shoot and kill whites 2, 3, or 400% more than their crime rate justifies. Year to year, this is consistent. Leftists who know this and continue to propagandize that the country and the police are racist are doing it not to help blacks, but to disunite society for political interest, clearly anti-patriotic political interest, even treasonous. Coming from these people, this is not terribly convincing. Or the influence by means of tens of billions of dollars, which is, however, legal as it is disguised as even philanthropy, but is actually meant for propaganda and protests. It is likely that people in the 60s would highly approve of people close to Trump speaking to Russian officials outside the established channels of the CIA, precisely because liberals and leftists then did not trust the CIA, while now they see it as a friendly organization that can oppose Trump, especially as the left has accepted imperialism. Trump has been accused of hurting the feelings of every minority and of spies. Can anyone imagine a hippie at Woodstock saying, "I'm going to be furious if in the future there is a president who does anything to insult the CIA"? In the 60s, if on one side there were the imperialist warmongers desperately wanting to engage in a war and who controlled the media and politicians, and on the other side the president was against the war, wouldn't liberals be immediately suspicious of the media and politicians instead of believing every accusation they make against the president, when the accusers are so ridiculous that they accuse him of being simultaneously a racist, nationalist, and a traitor, like accusing someone of having sex non-stop and being a virgin? And wouldn't they be suspicious knowing that only imperialists and leftists see Russia as an enemy, as an obstacle to their geopolitical military empire or one-world multicultural empire? Wouldn't they be suspicious knowing that leftists and imperialist neoconservatives together accuse Trump? After all, the left did not support Trump even on the issue of not engaging in war. One has to remember that politicians and judges above all care about their career or money. Thus they try to be on good terms with the establishment that supports mass immigration, multiculturalism, and war, and opposes Trump. Most Republican politicians also support, albeit secretly, mass immigration, multiculturalism, and war, and are against Trump. Is it possible to believe that these people truly care about the accusation of Trump's illegal cooperation with Russia? Leftists did not see Russia as an enemy when it really was an enemy under communism. They simply dislike Russia now because it is not part of the multicultural scheming, a legal technicality that played no role, and even if it had, it would have been minor compared to the enormous role played in the elections by the media that propagandized against Trump non-stop. But no one would care about this matter unless he is a fanatic or an obedient political follower who is using this matter as he would use any other matter, as another means to oppose Trump. Impeaching Trump is the equivalent not of impeaching Nixon, but of impeaching Robert Kennedy if he had lived to be president, impeached for some minor offense, the real reason being that he was against the war. Impeaching Trump is the roar of the establishment. The two parties, judges, media, the protesters paid by George Soros money or who are organized political partisans, themselves products of the establishment. It is a means to conduct more wars and open the border permanently. It is not a matter of morality or legality. None of these people mentioned impeachment over killing 500,000 people and destroying the lives of 30 million and the deaths of American soldiers. One may compare how letting a young woman die intentionally by choosing not to inform the police to go and save her after an accident, letting her die after struggling for more than 2 hours for air, was acceptable by the media and justice system, and the leftist politician who let her die continued his successful career, while President Nixon was impeached for covering up a burglary he had previously not known about. Certainly a crime, but not one that results in death. It is not what you do, but if powerful people have a motive to hurt you. Who will dare oppose the establishment and its policy of war and mass immigration if Trump is impeached over insignificant talks that had no effect on anything, neither on the elections nor on foreign policy, while a politician can instead follow a policy approved of by the establishment and get away with murder, mass murder, and war-scale mass murder? Compared to this, people close to Trump having unauthorized talks with Russians is the equivalent of spitting on the sidewalk. These actions were illegal, but training Muslim fanatics to start a civil war with nearly 500,000 dead is legal. Other matters are far bigger than the Russian issue, but simply camouflaged as legal or are not investigated, thus their illegality remains unknown. The spy community immediately created problems for Trump as he became president, with allegations about Russians influencing the elections. Although absolutely no proof or even indications show Trump having any connection to any of this, the effect was that it provided the excuse to investigate Trump's campaign. Obviously, these people are the deep state. If they choose to attack Trump, it means that they see his policy as dangerous to their interests. Consider the Clinton-Russian uranium deal. No calls for impeachment, and importantly, no calls from the Republicans. The enemy of the Republican establishment is Trump, not Clinton. This may not be immediately obvious. Republican politicians supported or pretended to support President Trump's idea for the wall, fearing the reaction of their voters if they opposed the wall, but their real intentions were clear. 25% of Republican senators wanted to cancel the border by proposing that all illegal immigrants be allowed to enter if they are families with children, which meant absolutely all illegal immigrants would be allowed to enter, as all have children or could bring a relative's child with the full consent of his family. With the Clinton-Russia uranium deal, Russia got control of the uranium company in Kazakhstan, which was owned by the Canadian company it was allowed to buy, expanding Russian influence in the region, giving Russia a strategic geopolitical advantage. Thus, there was an important effect. This is not necessarily illegal or anti-patriotic on the part of Clinton, but it is infinitely more suspicious than Trump's people talking to Russians, which had no effect on anything. Yet the people who investigated the Clinton affair and found nothing wrong are the same ones who later investigated Trump, hoping desperately with no evidence to find something against him. One may consider the enormous difference here. The people President Obama hired protected the Democratic Party's people and their interests. The people Trump hired moved against him because they served the establishment. Trump hired as Deputy Attorney General the man who hired the prosecutor who is desperately trying to find something illegal against Trump. As for what the Russians did, it was insulting to Americans and illegal, but looking at the big picture, it is mostly a legal issue. Unless this influence increases enormously in size, it cannot be considered a significant danger. If it had been Americans doing the same thing, it would have been legal. If these Russians had become American citizens, it would have been legal. And if George Soros had not become an American citizen, then what he does with his billions of dollars given to influence elections would have been thousands and thousands of times more illegal than what the Russians did. Not to mention that Americans interfere in other countries' choice of government as individuals or on state level, both covertly and overtly. The Russian election interference was low-level stuff, not an attack. For a century, the United States and Russia have interfered in each other's politics with spies and funding opposition, and the American left never cared about the fact that the Russian government was funding the American Communist Party for 60 years, which constituted election interference. The secret services claimed Russia wanted to undermine public faith in the democratic process. These spies did not investigate or claim that public faith in democracy is undermined by the fact that it is easy for non-citizens and illegal immigrants to vote, if they choose to do so, because courts do not allow states to verify the citizenship of the voters. A citizen should care more not about the legal issue if under 1% was influenced to vote a certain way, but about the real danger to democracy, even to nationhood itself, which regards the tacit conspiracy between politicians, media, neoconservatives, Wall Street, and large corporations who through the media influence and brainwash 20 or 30% to vote a certain way. Is it not likely that as the secret services, such as the CIA and other organizations, essentially cooperate with George Soros as they both fund color revolutions in other countries to bring down governments, that these two would also cooperate on bringing down the American president whom they both do not like? Soros funds the protests, and the secret services do their part. Removing Trump from the presidency was repeatedly stated by many immediately as he became president by means of the 25th Amendment, which allows the removal if a president is unable to govern, not removal if leftists do not like his policies and his proposed wall. Bringing down an elected government, one way or another. These people included neoconservative warmongers writing for leftist newspapers. This simply means fight Trump. 900 protests when Trump fired his attorney general, and it was many leftists who were demanding that he be fired. People do not just wake up in the morning and protest about such things. There is organization and money involved, and still all 900 together had only 350,000 protesters in a country of over 300 million. In Europe, countries with a population 10 or 20 times smaller see far higher numbers in protests. So-called liberals today have nothing to do with the old meaning of liberal. Open the border and bomb Syria was not the battle cry of the 60s generation or 60s liberals. It is what today's so-called liberals want. The leftist newspapers that promote mass immigration and multiculturalism are also the ones that for decades have promoted the views of the leading neoconservatives in journalism, who support every war and urge for even more imperialist wars. The most important American newspapers are on the left, but claim to also present opinions of conservatives, but only the neoconservative warmongers, a very small minority among the people who are conservative, never someone from the great majority of conservatives who oppose illegal immigration. Conservative people are generally against American wars until the leftist media propagandize in favor of war, propagandize the neoconservative dogma of constant war, with patriotic brainwash like support our troops instead of don't risk our troops' lives. In the past, the left was against imperialist war, against the secret services, and against making an enemy out of Russia to the point that it would lead to dangerous confrontation. Now, especially since the fall of communism in 1990, the left supports the opposite on all these issues. If there is any doubt about the fact that the neoconservative establishment's fury over Trump stopping their imperialist policy of endless wars and their aggressive policy against Russia is connected to the calls for impeachment, calls made by their leftist puppets. Neoconservatives and leftists talk about collusion. Neoconservatives have been in the key positions of power regarding foreign policy and war for 50 years. They cooperated with or used all presidents as tools to start wars, destroy countries, kill millions, and destroy the lives of tens of millions. Only two presidents, Reagan and Trump, turned the tables on them and used the neoconservatives as tools, useful idiots, and instead of more wars and dangerous aggression, risking war with a superpower, followed a policy of less war and pressure coupled with the prospect of cooperation. This may be difficult to understand now because for decades the neoconservatives have been pretending that Reagan was one of them, hoping to gain an advantage from his popularity. Suffice it to say that the neoconservative accusations against Trump through the leftist media are the same as the neoconservative accusations against President Reagan when he tried to come to friendly terms with the Soviet Union and avoid the dangers of confrontation. Treason. Shame. Trump gave the impression of trusting Russian President Putin more than his advisors and the CIA. Reagan trusted Gorbachev more than his neoconservative advisors. Reagan placed neoconservatives in advisory positions and seats of power, but when he saw the time was right to limit the Cold War and come to an agreement with the Soviet Union, he did it, despite the fierce opposition from the neoconservatives. Trump placed imperialist neoconservatives in high positions too, because of their knowledge, abilities, and contacts with politicians and media that could limit opposition to him. Then he did what he had promised to the people. Remove the army from Syria and thus face the fury of the neoconservatives. Trump used the neoconservatives like useful idiots and then discarded them.
7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Having grown up with the fear of this realistic possibility, would this not have been a dream come true for the 60s generation, or would they have preferred this? Choosing to have good relations with a nuclear superpower is not treason. Treason is choosing to come to confrontation with a nuclear superpower in order to derive some personal or political benefit. Treason is mass immigration, to import immigrants who, as future voters, will vote predominantly for one side, to steal elections from the native population. Treason is dividing the nation and making half the population hate the other half by pretending that those who oppose illegal immigration are racists, or pretending that Trump is racist, as whenever Trump insults one person, a black, a woman, or more often a white man for their views, or insults criminals, the media claim he is insulting all blacks, all women, all immigrants, etc. Would the hippies agree with this leftist media attempt to create a mentality of a race war, like Charles Manson imagined? The media has come to propagate the madness of Charles Manson. Their aim is to substitute the old ideal of racial harmony, where everyone attempts to see people not as black or white, but as individuals and judge them as individuals, to the new dogma of seeing people in racial terms. Whites are racists and blacks are victims, and thus blacks must see whites as enemies. Every white person must believe that he must eternally bear the guilt for past slavery and white privilege, even if he is poor himself, and even if his ancestors immigrated to the United States long after slavery was abolished. And every black person must believe that he is a victim, even if he is rich, must believe he is a victim even if he is a criminal who victimizes others, and must believe he is powerless in a white system, even if he is the politician who largely controls the system. People wish to believe whatever is pleasant to them, pleasant lies. This is especially true of emotional people and the young, telling them you are oppressed and have to rebel, or your poverty is not the fault of your being born in a single-parent home, or your academic and professional choices, or simply bad luck, but of the fact that you are a victim of white racism, sexism, homophobia, anything. Their dogma, no free speech, supposedly to protect the sensitivities of certain people. Globalization, so rules are mandated by treaties and unelected officials, not by elected governments. and mass immigration that changes the voting body, substituting the existing citizenry with new voters, the vast majority of whom will vote for the left. Not some silly revolutionary left, but the globalizing establishment left. All these lead to loss of democracy. In the 60s, people used different means from those of the past, but aimed to achieve the same goal. Sometimes the difference was clear, as in achieving unity by means of intolerance or tolerance. There was clear right and wrong. Mostly it was less clear and depended on the circumstances. Patriotism by means of war or peace, freedom by being suspicious or open, progress and the pursuit of happiness by being conservative or liberal. Now the means are aimed at a different goal, the collapse of Western society, and believing this is the precise meaning of making the world a better place. What in the 60s used to be only fringe minorities that few took seriously is now promoted by the establishment as a dogma. The old large majority of open-minded liberals have silently accepted or actively support this new dogma, which is promoted by the elite that owns the media and universities and partially controls politics, and their leftist employees have joined forces with them as they both desire the internationalization and globalization of politics to substitute the nation-states with international treaties and bodies of unelected officials, going full circle to establish the exact opposite of the purported ideals of the 60s.